Hey, I'm looking for Fred Rogers. In here.
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Please won't you be my neighbor? Hello, neighbor.
Mr. Rogers, I'm here to interview you.
It is so nice to meet you.
You okay?
Profiling Mr. Rogers.
Boyd, please don't ruin my childhood.
So A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is about the so it's a biopic. It's a true story of friendship between Fred Rogers, a fairly well-known American children's TV show presenter. He's someone that if you mention his name to anyone in Britain, they tend to not have any idea who you're talking about. But I think the impression I get is that he's quite celebrated across the generations in America. The story looks at a friendship between Fred Rogers and journalist Tom Junnard, who was writing for Esquire and got tasked with writing a piece on Fred Rogers. He appears as Lloyd Vogel in the film, played by Matthew Rhys, and Fred Rogers is played by Tom Hanks. It's a fairly simple story. It's a cynical journalist being placed in front of possibly one of the most impossibly positive, good, true, honest people that has maybe, well, walked this earth perhaps, but certainly been a part of entertainment. But Mariel Heller, the director, takes what is quite a simple story, quite a simple format of the biopic, and I think she really just, she creates an incredible film out of it. She uses the format of the TV show. She uses some of the kind of childlike animations and graphics and stuff that there would have been in this TV show, and she weaves that into the film, and it makes it more fun to watch. It makes it more interesting and exciting to watch than some of your more traditional biopic format films. Tom Hanks is incredible. I don't think there's anyone else that could play Fred Rogers. He possesses the same essence that I feel like Fred Rogers does. He seems like someone who would hold the door open for you, someone that would pick something up off the floor if you drop it. He's someone who feels like he's not being tarnished by the sort of ego and cynicism that can maybe reach you in American entertainment. And yeah, I've seen the documentary that came out about Fred Rogers at the end of last year. That was called "Won't You Be My Neighbor?" And both the documentary and the film, you sit there and you think, surely not. Like, surely this person can't exist. Something that give it another couple of minutes and we're going to hit that point where the bad news comes out, the news story, that's kind of prevailed across a lot of British children entertainers. But it doesn't. He's great, and he says incredible things like, "I don't eat anything that has a mother," and your heart just melts. Yeah, I'd like to know what you guys think of it.
Well, ultimately, I pretty much agree with you. I mean, I also did grow up with Mr. Rogers, and I really wish I had seen the documentary because I think I would quite enjoy it, and I think it was one of the top grossing documentaries of like 2018. I really, really liked the direction of this film, and I think I wrote in our blog that Mariel Heller's like "Can You Ever Forgive Me" was one of my favorite films of last year as well. The only thing is I would say is because I had no expectation of what the story was, I think there was a little bit of time really focused on the journalist and his life. And while I know that's an important part of of the film and the story. I think it was weighted a lot more on that way, and sometimes I wanted to see more of the Tom Hanks special, story of that, because I was really loving that part. So that's the only little bit of criticism I would have.
So the funny thing is, the weighting of it towards the journalists played by Matthew Rhys is actually really what I liked about it. Now, maybe this comes from the fact that I hadn't seen the documentary. I'd hoped to watch it before we reviewed the film, but basically my knowledge of Fred Rogers is zero. I mean, basically it's a name that pops up in American pop culture for me before I went to see this film. And to somebody who, like me, who can be a bit of a hard-bitten cynic when I want to be, this kind of looks like the sort of like gooey, syrupy film that I maybe would grow a bit tired of. It's not that film. I really do think it's excellent, and part of that is because what I find interesting about it as a biopic is it doesn't do that thing of chronicling things from someone's life and what effect it had on their state of mind, and it doesn't do that. And I think for somebody like Fred Rogers, as I now understand him, it takes a very intelligent approach in that it shows his impact on other people. Because I think what's interesting about Fred Rogers is the degree of reverence with which he is treated, certainly by people I know in real life, but also the characters in the film. So by showing the impact he has on Matthew Rhys's character, who has had a difficult relationship with his father, he has unresolved issues there. Like, as the film starts, he basically gets into an altercation with his father at his sister's wedding. And then the way that he goes on to process that, and then seeing what effect that has on children, and what Fred Rogers and Fred Rogers Show means to them, to me, it actually works out as a more interesting, more impactful way of telling that story. The kind of the value of kindness, the value of being able to talk about emotions, and it really, really hit home for me. The elements for, like, the connective bits that are done in the style of kind of like the miniatures, at first it didn't really work for me, to be honest, but I think what that gives, again, is very intelligently done, because I think what that does is that gives that warm sort of nostalgia for Mr. Rogers' neighbourhood that the story itself isn't actually, right? Because it focuses on the journalist and his interactions and the impact that Fred Rogers has, you're not getting that kind of nostalgic element that people love from this sort of film from that. But you do get it from these kind of like, these little kind of like stylistic elements that give that. So I actually think that's quite well placed, and it gives people who are familiar with that show from their childhood, it maybe gives them that little thing to latch on to with a bit of fondness in addition to the story. I really thought it was excellent. I thought Tom Hanks, of course, like as Carice said, is excellent and kind of is perfectly suited for that role. I think Matthew Rhys, who's done a lot of excellent television work with the Americans, but I think he gets a very good role here. I think Marielle Heller also handles New York very well as a period piece. I mean, Amanda will be able to speak to that better than I do, but in the same way that she did with Can You Ever Forgive Me, which was another excellent film, I think this whole thing just comes together excellently, and the key thing is you don't really need to know anything about Fred Rogers in order to get something out of this film.
Yeah, but I think what you exactly said, hearkening back, I mean, without those moments, and if it was just a story about this journalist, and you're not hearkening back to that warm feeling that show gives, particularly an American who watched it for so many years, it's sad that it didn't actually come over, because it's probably one of our best public television shows ever, but it certainly, there was a mood created in that film, and I do believe that Heller does that really well, and she does that really well for New York, and I think it was also Pittsburgh as well, so really, really well done. So A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood comes out on the 31st of January across the UK. Check it out.